Frog in the throat. Thanks for dropping by. It's Sunday again. What happened to all those days in between? I remember. I did next to nothing, didn't I? And to me, I think when you don't do much, the days seem to go quicker because there's no memories. There's nothing significant. You just sort of think, I had a really great day on Wednesday. I did same as I did on Tuesday. Same as I did on Monday. And without those things, there's just nothing memorable. We watched a bit of telly. Yeah, didn't we all? And that's really good fun. That is daytime TV. I'd rather watch paint dry, I think. Anyway, some news. I had a letter. Now, I don't get letters, apart from... No, I don't even get that many bills, come to think of it, because I pay most of my stuff online. I had a letter. I opened it up. It's from the NHS. Because they've been trying to contact me and couldn't. That's because they've still got my landline on their records, which I haven't used for donkey's years. I only use my mobile. So basically inviting me to phone in to talk about a COVID-19 jab. So I phoned them up and they said, are you willing to have the vaccination? I think that's why they want to. They're not just blandly booking people's appointments, because some people are just not going to turn up, are they? Because they don't want it, They need putting in a field altogether with a big high fence around them. They don't want it. If you've got a medical reason, that's different. But anyway, so I phoned them up, had a nice chat with the lady, and she said, she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. She said, "Oh, I'm awfully sorry, Mr. Frampton. The last available appointment was booked while we were talking." Duh. So she said the next batch of appointments will be available Monday morning. So if you ring in on Monday morning, we'll get you sorted out. Have you any preference for a day or anything? I said, don't care, any day, any time. Tell me, I'll be there. So we're looking forward to getting a hole in the arm. Here's a thought. If you've got high blood pressure and you have an injection, when they take the needle out, does it go psh? I'm in a funny mood, as you can tell. Right, I want to talk about things going wrong with our orchids, and we automatically assume it's us. Well, it's not always. Fair bit of the time it probably is. I think, am I feeding right? Am I watering okay? Are things getting too much water and this, that and the other? That takes a bit of practice and a bit of knowledge. But 9 times out of 10, if your orchids aren't doing very well, it won't be any of those little things. It'll be the one big thing, the environment you've got them in. That's the major factor, or I believe it is. If you're absolutely certain your environment is very suited to the orchids you're growing, well, then it's going to be one of the other things. But we all know that dry air is not good. Some orchids don't like too much light. Some need a lot. Yeah. So you've got all these little factors which sometimes are quite difficult to actually adjust, especially if you're growing in the home. The only way you can get more light is to get closer to a window and perhaps choose a different window. If you've got a west-facing window, that's pretty good light for a third of the day. It's not for the rest of the day, is it? Because the sun's the other way, up the other end of the house somewhere, warming up another room. So perhaps choose another window if you want more light. If you want less light, come away from the south-facing ones. I'm talking Northern Hemisphere again here. Do apologise to you sort of Australians and New Zealanders, you upside-down people. But I'm not hanging from the ceiling upside down to talk to you. You'll have to put up with it. But yeah, I tend to just automatically think Northern Hemisphere, north of the equator, because that's probably where the majority of my audience is. But the others are not excluded. I do know you're there, and we're in the middle of winter, you're in the middle of summer. Must be nice down there at the moment. Enjoying the beach, are you? Actually, it's probably the middle of the night, come to think of it. Anyway, that environment to me is the first thing to question. You think, I've got good humidity, stays around 65, 70%. for the type of orchids I've got. If you're growing Phalaenopsis, that's plenty good enough. There's a few species would like it higher, but most people are not necessarily growing the species Phalaenopsis, tend to grow for the hybrids. Big and blousy, lovely flowers, many of them, all that sort of stuff, you know. But they're more tolerant than a lot of other types. So if you grow those well in your home, and then you get a couple of Oncidium intergenerics, I would safely say that you can expect them to not do quite as well. And the reason will be, 9 times out of 10, your air's too dry. Well, I've got a humidifier. I've got some gravel trays. My humidity's not bad at all. Is your air still? Is there any air movement? Yeah? I've got lots of little spots on my Oncidium leaves. Well, that's a fungus. And it's quite prone to go for Oncidium intergenerics. Why? 9 times out of 10 it's because the air's too still. The fungus gets a hold and has time to settle. Keep that air moving. Yeah, I mean that's it's probably one of the little factors that can do the most good. Now, if your orchids are sat there like that, it's too strong. That's not a gentle breeze. That's force 8 gale, endearingly known in a lot of circumstances as a draft, and that can do untold damage to unopened buds. It'll knock them down. It's one of the common causes of bud blast, a draft. And a draft is basically moving air that is a lot cooler than the air it's moving. You'll know when you can cause a draft, do that. Yeah? Why does your face feel cold? All you're doing is blowing the same air across your face. Yeah? But it feels cooler. That's what you need for your plants. Yeah? What about temperature? Easily forgotten. Now, if you're growing in the home, there are some things that are not going to be too happy because it'll be too warm, and that's the cooler growers. Well, don't grow those then, unless you've got an unheated room. Yeah? Unheated north-facing room. Nice big fat windowsill. Masdevallias with lots of flowers on, because that's pretty good light. Because the sun never hits it, right up near that glass, and it's a cool room. Little fan, gentle breeze, humidity trays, possibly a fogger sat up above them that just puffs out a little bit of fog every now and again. Nearly created a mini greenhouse environment sat on that windowsill. So you can create good environments in many, many different places. But some environments, everybody thinks, oh, I wish I had a greenhouse. Well, if you had one, you probably wish you hadn't. They are probably the single most difficult places to control environment and keep it suitable for orchids. First of all, the sun hits the glass, whack, up goes the temperature. That's all your cool growers messed up for a start. So you've now got to think seriously high humidity. And what's the way that everybody recommends to cool down the greenhouse? Open the vents. Let that hot air out. Let some cool air in down the lower vents. Yeah? Open the door, do all that stuff. Where's your humidity gone? Straight out the window. Yeah? And you will have dropped the temperature a bit, but if the sun's still out, it's not going to go down a huge amount, it's going to stay high. So keeping a greenhouse cool when the sun's on it is not easy. And then you get winter time in your nice greenhouse where everything's been comfy in the sun, in the summer. A little bit too hot on occasions, but not bad, not bad. I've managed to keep the humidity up, gallons of water all over the floor. We've done pretty well here. Autumn comes, down goes the temperature because the sun's not there so often and the days are getting shorter, the nights are longer and colder. Now suddenly you've got to keep it warm, and that costs money. And a greenhouse has got so much glass which loses heat quite badly, so you then have to start thinking about bubble wrap, and do we need 2 layers, all that sort of stuff. So actually controlling the environment in your greenhouse can get costly and involves a fair bit of work. You know, spread out over a whole year, but you know, if you're going to put bubble wrap on to keep it warm, you have to take it off again the other end of the winter, aren't you? Yeah. Then you'll be putting shading up. And then you might have to add another layer of shade. Then you've got to take it off again at the other end of the summer. Yeah? Humidifiers, you know, they don't run on air, they need water poured into them frequently. Where's the water going to come from? If you put hard tap water in a humidifier, all that calcium carbonate that furs up your kettle is going to come out in that mist and fog and go all over your plants. You'll film up your leaves. Now you've got to start cleaning your leaves off, unless you can get pure water. So it's not as easy as it sounds having a greenhouse. I bet I've just put a load of people off. I was thinking of getting one. Blow that for a lark. However, this sort of environment cuts the two. Halfway between the two. I've got some of the problems of greenhouse growing, because yes, the sun hits the glass and it gets hot, and I have to deal with it. I have to keep the humidity high. Yeah. So, but I've got the luxury of opening this door where the camera is, which starts to change air between the house and this conservatory, converted conservatory. There is an air exchange going on. Now in there at the moment, the heating's on. Well, it's not actually on at the moment, I've just turned it off. It's starting to get a bit warm in there. And it's warm and dry, which I don't like. I don't mind warm and reasonably moist, but not dry. Anyway, so what's happening now is the dry, warmer air from in there is drifting gently out here, and some of my very high humid air is drifting into the house, which I actually like. What are we? Because this door's open, we're down at around 70% humidity at the moment, but we're only at around 18, 19 degrees, so that humidity is plenty high enough at that temperature. If the temperature was 25 degrees, I'd want my humidity higher than 70%. And that's not as easy as it sounds. Have you ever tried getting high humidity with heat? It takes twice as much flipping water into the air to actually keep that number at a high level. So in here I've got the luxury of, in autumn and spring, I can cut down my expense on the heating, on the heater on the floor, my shiny new one, which I already kicked twice today. Yeah, I can reduce its use by opening this door. That also reduces the humidity out here, which at those times of year is not bad because it starts getting a bit silly, it starts to build up. During the winter time out here, first thing in the morning, it's bordering on 100% out here, but the temperature's only 14, 15 degrees, so that's okay. You try getting 100% humidity at 28 degrees in your environment. That ain't so easy. You'd probably need 2 or 3 of the types of foggers I've got, and they'd have to be on all the time. And everything would end up getting soaking wet. That's called a cloud forest. Anyway, back to the things that can go wrong. Oh, some of my leaves are going yellow. Yes, and? Well, is that okay? Well, it might be. It might not. Well, how am I supposed to know? How did I know when I first started? You have to watch videos, ask people, put comments in. But there are times when some yellowing leaves are perfectly natural. One of the Oncidium types in one of the house plants in there has got a bright yellow leaf on it now. Well, the first thing I do is, what pseudobulb's that hanging off of? Oh, it's the oldest one on the plant, that's fine. That's natural drop, that's fine, yeah. If it was on one of my new growths that's only halfway up to full size, that growth's got a problem because that leaf shouldn't be going yellow. Now we've got to look into it. Where is it going yellow? Is it on the tip? Is it down the sides? Is it the vein up the middle? Is the yellowing starting from the base? Has the whole leaf just suddenly gone yellow overnight? Because the answer to those will help point you into thinking what could be wrong. One of my Phalaenopsis, over a period of 2 or 3 days, a leaf went through yellow and brown and fell on the table. Which leaf was it? The little one at the base. That's all right, don't need that. That's just natural drop. But these are the questions that you should hopefully be able to ask when something starts looking wrong with a leaf. Now, if you get up in the morning and all the leaves on your plant have gone yellow, you've probably just lost your plant. Now you've got a serious question. What sort of thing could do that? Pause for thought. Anybody got an answer? I know you can't give it to me, but did you get an answer to that? My plant has been sat on that dining room table, happy, for several years now. I got up this morning, all of the leaves have gone yellow. Why did that happen then? The most common cause will be air pollution. What sort of things can do that? You've just put your bowl of fruit next to it, haven't you? There's a gas comes off of fruit as it ripens, and it'll do orchid leaves in quick as anything. I think it's called ethylene, but don't quote me on it. Or we've just changed from a log burner to burning coal. You've just put fumes into the room that weren't there before. These are the sort of things you've got to think of. Is anything burning? Is there a flame anywhere near these plants? Because that can go from burning clean to burning dirty. Yeah? And then it's giving off fumes. And some fuels, ask Todd, he'll tell you which one, just give off nasty fumes anyway, even if they are burning clean. So, you know, those are the sort of things off. If a whole plant goes down quickly that was doing well, something's changed that's quite dramatic. And it might not be obvious until you start questioning. But 9 times out of 10, it'll be something in the air. Now, it could be something in the pot, but it's less likely. Because that tends to be more of a gradual thing. Like media breaking down doesn't happen overnight while you're in bed, and it's there when you get up in the morning. It takes quite a long period of time. And therein lies a problem that most people get caught out with. My plant's doing really well. I'm really pleased. Oh, I've got a spike on it. It's doing really well. Oh, the blooms are out, and you've forgotten what's in your pot. All that time, well, that is happening. Are you considering what's in your pot? Because if your media's on the way out, your plant can carry on looking great for some considerable time while its roots die. And then there'll come a point where it can't do very well anymore. And if that's the point, you look in your pot and think, oh, crikey, that media's gone. Oh, so have me roots. That could be the end of your plant because you left it late. So keep your eye on your plants. But the most common things that go wrong are chucking too much water in the pot, basically. Or it's not so much the amount, it's the frequency. Soggy pots. Now some plants need to stay moist virtually all the time, and in the home they probably don't ever get cold enough to worry about them staying wet in lower temperatures, because in theory you shouldn't really be growing those sort of plants. You wouldn't have selected that type of plant for your environment. Yeah, but normal, comfortable human conditions in a house are going to be suitable for a set of orchids without too much hassle. Stick to those orchids and your plant should do well over quite a long period of time. And when they start to not be doing so well, the chances are the problem's in the pot, not above it. Yeah, and that's just the way of the orchid world, basically. Now, some people push their luck. I mean, I know somebody grows the most brilliant vandas in the house. And you sort of think, well, surely their roots are always constantly dry and the air's dry and that. Well, there are ways of getting around that. A simple little thing like an alcove, you know, an indent in a wall somewhere where you've got 3 sides of a box. Well, if you get that area in there humid, some of that humidity is going to stay in there a lot of the time and not drift out into the drier air perhaps. I know somebody who's got an air curtain, like you get when you walk in the shop. You're casually walking along and you see something in the window, you think, oh, I'll go and have a look at that. And you walk in the shop door, whoosh, there's an air curtain up there, blasting your hair onto the floor, and all your clothes go like that, because it holds the warm air in and keeps the cold air out, forms a curtain. Yeah, well, you can do that with humidity, form an air curtain. You put up a physical curtain, actually have a barrier. And if you want to be really great and grow plants indoors, you get an enclosed area, you know, vivarium to terrarium, whatever you want to call it. It's got lots of names, but really the name is not really the unit, it's what you're going to keep inside it. But yeah, I mean, I would love, pardon me, a unit in the house that was probably 6 foot tall, glass on 3 sides, would have vents in the top with little fans on, yeah, to actually keep air flowing. Lots of humidity trays in the bottom and a humidifier in the bottom with another little fan to move that away from the bottom of the unit. It would have cork bark all over the back of it. That would gradually get live moss going on it. Some of the mounted orchids would be planted direct on that. There would be miniature ferns and some other plants, not just orchids, because I want to keep that humidity up. And those other plants would provide places for roots of orchids to go in behind, yeah? And then I'd have some sort of log or tree trunk that would have a flat bit on it and some bits like that, and that would have moss growing and other plants on it. And you could strap some pots behind your log so that the plant came up over the top and you couldn't see the pot. I'd love something like that. But I've got this. I don't want 2 flipping places full of plants I've got to look after. But there are ways of getting excellent environments in the home, but they often involve enclosing a space. I've seen a window enclosed. You get, well, we call them bay windows in this country. It's a design on a house that has a curved window with a curved windowsill that you can walk into. So you're sort of standing inside this curved window. So it's all glass, yeah? Now facing south that's going to get pretty hot, but I've seen that have like a set of sliding glass doors put across. You've now got an enclosed space, you've now got somewhere you can keep the humidity up. Yeah? And it's not going to get all your wallpaper and your curtains all green and mouldy on the inside of the house, just the ones out there. So I think the environment causes, or the lack of the proper environment causes more hassles than probably all the other little bits and pieces put together. And that's the one I would say that a bit of work will do the most good. So if you've got a humidity hygrometer, whatever you call it, the meter that measures the humidity, you know, even if it's only a £6 one like that, that currently says 65%, that's because all my humidity's going in there at the moment. We'll get that back in a minute. I've got to water the mounts, that whacks it up again. But yeah, if your humidity is permanently down sort of 50–55%, just getting it up to 60 is enough to do a little change and make your plants feel a bit better. Now some plants will be over the moon with 60%. Cattleyas don't need high humidity. I mean, maybe some of the species, but not really. You know, they like to be cosy warm, most of them. There are some cool growers in there, but not many. You could average that and say they like to be cosy warm, like what we do, those sort of temperatures. If it gets warmer than what we like, they'll probably still be okay. They don't need high humidity, but they like some. Phalaenopsis, they like to be warm and cosy, most of them. There's a couple of the species are actually cool growers. They come from high up. Not many. They like warm and cosy, yeah? They're not so fussed about the humidity. They'll put up with it quite a bit lower than most other orchids. That's why a lot of people grow them in the home, because they do okay in there. I've known really good growers, prize winners in shows, guys that grow some great stuff. You mentioned the word Phalaenopsis. Oh, I can't grow those. I just cannot grow those. You sort of think that's supposed to be the easiest orchid in the world to grow. And the reason they're not growing them very well is probably because they're out in the greenhouse. And their greenhouse environment may not be ideal for the Phalaenopsis. And a lot of the problems that you get in greenhouses is you get this thing in your hand that water squirts out of, and you go like that all over the greenhouse and all over the plants. Well, Phalaenopsis have got, because of the way we pot them, which is not how they grow, have got this nice little well, and water collects in it. Yeah? If that's clean water, it will probably evaporate before it can do any harm. But if it's not, if there's pathogens and things like that in it, that can set off a rot, and that's the crown of your plant gone. which in the case of a Phalaenopsis normally means that's the end of the plant. So a lot of these things that go wrong, oh, am I feeding enough? Well, a simple statement will probably be you're probably feeding too much rather than not enough. Because if you're giving them some now and again, that's okay. If you're giving them lots all the time over and over again, that's probably not okay. Yeah. If you're growing in organic media, the more feed you put in there that the plant doesn't use, the more it will aid the media to start breaking down, because the bacteria and all the things that help that media break down need food. You're giving it to them. So make sure the food that you put in the pot should be for the plant, not for anything else. And there shouldn't be much left over. So how much is that then? What's a relatively small amount? Always think, what do the wild plants? What do the wild plants get? But we're doing an experiment to find out, are those scabby looking tatty plants that you see pictures of in the wild, often with masses of blooms, but the plant, oh, that tatty looking thing, ugh, that would never win in a show. So, is it the lack of food that makes that plant tatty, or is it just the fact that they are out in the wild? Yeah? Or is it a combination of the two? But we will find out if we get a bigger, stronger, brighter green plant by feeding quite a bit more than another plant with our new experiment. But I'm sure lots of people are expecting some marvellous results there. Don't hold up your hopes, because I don't think these plants are going to look much different at the end of this growing season. We shall see. In which case we might have to decide perhaps we didn't give it enough extra food. But I still think there comes a point where the plant can't take any more. So it doesn't matter how much more you pour on it or in the pot, it's going to say, no, I'm full, I don't need any more. Yeah? Because it's got to work its way through the plant. All those elements have got to do their job. Excess moisture coming out the top, all that sort of function, that sort of metabolism has to continue. Yeah, and there are times when that slows down and doesn't work properly, like when it's too hot. Yeah? So there's a lot of factors involved, but most people probably feed too high. Also, you could say, are you feeding with the right stuff? Well, the only thing I would say is that if you've got a fertiliser that's got a big long list of things in it, it's probably got everything you need. But watch out for the calcium and magnesium being missing, as they often are, because they're expected to be in your tap water. Well, if you're not using tap water, you may be missing those two vital elements. And in addition to that, you've got no guarantee your tap water has actually got anywhere near enough of those two. Yeah? And you may never know, although you should be able to find out the analysis of the water company. But yeah, I mean, making sure that that list is there. You know, it's easy to you can search on the internet what elements is needed for plant growth. It will give you the list of all of them, including those tiny little ones that you've got a job to pronounce in some cases. You need all of that. The proportions of them are not as important as them all being there. Yeah, especially when you get up in the top 5. Top 3, we all know, the NPK bit. Yeah. Now, those can be all the same. That'll work. You don't need as much P as the N and the K. So if the P's a bit lower, it's not the end of the world. That'll still work. If the K is a bit higher than the N, that'll still work. If the N's a bit higher than the K, that'll still work. But the thing you need to watch is the N. What sort is it? Yeah? And if it's urea or ammonium type, yeah, it's not going to be as good for your orchids as the nitrate type nitrogen, because that is readily available for the plant, and the other two have to have a bit of work done on them, microbes and things. Urea I don't think can be used in much of that shape or form. That needs converting to the ammonium type, which needs microbes and things like that, which in our orchid pots we tend to be a bit short on. And in addition to that, that population in your pot does good in higher temperatures. So if you're growing cool, you're not going to have much of that either. So nitrate, nitrogen, and then the rest of the list in certain proportions. Calcium and magnesium need to be there in a reasonable amount. I'd say calcium around half of the nitrogen value is about somewhere near. These don't have to be exact. And the magnesium a quarter to a third of the calcium value. So if you've got like, if the nitrogen is 15 and the calcium is 8, that's about a reasonable balance. And the magnesium 2 or 3, that's about right. Yeah, it's those sort of proportions. They don't have to be exact. You're not going to stand there with a white coat and goggles and, you know, little test tubes and, you know, scales that go down to sort of minute amounts of 2 grains of that, 4 grains. You don't need to. Just chuck some on there. Get too bogged down in that. But with that feed is the watering, and it's the thing that people take a while to get right. If you've been growing houseplants all your life, you're probably not going to be very good at first at watering your orchids, because they're going to get the dribble every day treatment, because that's what you used to do for your other houseplants. Make sure they're pretty moist all the time, sort of thing. And the concept of letting them go bone dry before you give them any water, it won't go in. It won't sink in. Well, it flipping well needs to. Not all orchids need to go bone dry. But if you're growing Phalaenopsis in the home in the winter time with your heating on, they don't need to go bone dry, because you'll probably find they're drying pretty damn quick. It's like mine in there. Those were only watered a couple of days ago. I've got a bud blast on one of the spikes. That's the dry air, I suspect. And those pots are bone dry. Yeah, well, given the warm, dry air that they're subject to at the moment, they shouldn't go bone dry. They should be heading towards dryness and then get a flipping good soak again. And in addition to that, what are they actually doing? Well, there's not much root growth going on. The new leaves have matured. One of them's got a pretty poor spike. With one bud blasting, it's got 2 buds left. That is not a Phalaenopsis spike. That's a pathetic attempt at blooming. Quite honestly, it would probably do the plant a lot of good to just take that spike off and forget it. It might trigger another leaf. But therein lies the problem. The more leaves you've got on your Phalaenopsis, the stronger the plant, the better your blooming's likely to be. And often with those mass-produced hybrids, the farther away in time that you can get from the point that you bought it, the more likely you are to get better spikes with more blooms on, because it's forgotten about all those hormones, growth inhibitors, all the various things that the trade can give it in its perfect environment to get it to produce those spikes that were on there when you bought it. And maybe one day you'll be able to produce a spike like that, but don't expect to do it in the first year or two, because the plants are so stressed out. They take a while to settle down again. And then if they settle down into an environment that suits them well, you may get some spikes like that. I mean, the thing that always amazed me was Rick, relatively new to orchids, not new to growing, that was one of his expressions. And the number of spikes he got on some of his Phalaenopsis. And that was the year he took them in. So for the winter time, he took them into what used to be his workshop, I think, and he set up lights and fans and things like that. And he had his feeding regime going on. I mean, he had a Phalaenopsis with 8 spikes on. I've never seen that before or since. 8? 2's good. 1's normal. Oh. But it obviously can be done. But his growing method won't suit a lot of people. Most of the time his plants were outside. They were in inorganic. They were in river rock, pebbles, stones, lava rock bits, inorganic. And if you're growing like that, it's physically not possible to give your plants too much water, because it goes straight through and dries quickly. And if you're watering every day or twice a day, think how often you can feed. And therein, I think, lies the difference between how he could grow and how I can grow. Because if I throw water in my organic-based pots, I didn't ought to be watering them again the next day. They're still soaking wet. They haven't got anywhere near round to using up that. So they might only be getting some new feed every week. What's left in the pot after that initial watering with the feed in then? Well, the plant's going to take in some of that feed. What's left? Well, it's the same stuff, isn't it? It's probably not, because the plant's probably been picky and actually said, right, we can use all of that, we'll have as much of that as we can get in. We don't need so much of that. We'll leave some of that behind. And then what's left behind, because it's not the original feed formula, it'll start changing its properties. And some of it may become not that happy. The plant may think, actually, I'd rather not have that. That can stay there where it is. And that's where you start getting build-ups in the pots, because the plant didn't use it quick enough and it stayed behind. Depending on the type of magnesium, the type of calcium and magnesium that's in your pot, if you leave them in there on their own too long, they'll start bonding. So suddenly what was good for the plant, because it didn't get used immediately, now is no good for the plant. Yeah, all these sort of things going on that if you feed low, don't happen and don't cause a problem. So yeah, I think most of the problems we should be able to analyse. Look up things, look up other people's channels. You know, people love to do a video about a problem, especially if they've got a solution, and then everybody learns. Yeah, because if you've got a problem and you do something and it works, well, we all need to know that, don't we? Yes, is the answer to that. If you are a video maker, a creator, then if you fix a problem, let us know. Or you could write a book that'll get published in about 8 years' time. Hardly anybody will read it, and in 20 years' time it'll probably be out of date. Or you could do a 10-minute video. So there you go. So videos, YouTube, Orchid World, are not all about wonderful things. They need to be about the failures, analysing what you think went wrong, and if you fixed it, for goodness sake, let us all know, because there could be hundreds and hundreds of people around the world with the same problem, and you found a solution. Okay, that might be unique for you in your environment, but it could help others. So get those videos done. Right, that will do. So I thought I saw a huge mealybug there. It'd catch my eye, but it wasn't. Things going wrong out here. This is not doing as well as it has been, my Dendrobium senile. Now it's coming to the end of a strange period for it, because this is not, strictly speaking, a winter rester. It is a cooler and drier in winter, but it's difficult to know how dry when it's actually got some growths that are actually moving. But the growths that were there at the start of winter have actually stopped now. They're not growing anymore. So should I be feeding this or not? Should I now give it a chance to have a bit of a rest? The other thing that you remember what I've said, 9 times out of 10, if there's something going wrong with the plant, it's the below ground bit. Well, when it's on a mount, there isn't anything below ground. But what there is a fair depth of very, very old moss. Now that's become live moss on the surface. I wonder what's underneath. Is that totally broken down moss and the root tips are in an acidic media that they don't like and they've stopped growing? Is it that? There's only one way to find out. It'll have to come off the mount, won't it? There's a chore I'm not looking forward to, but it's going to happen. That is going to come off the mount, because I don't think it's that firmly attached anyway. And it's not one plant. I think there was either 3 or 4 went on there. You can sort of see them. There's one here. There's one here. There's this obvious one here. And I think there was another little one that might not have made it. I can't remember. But yeah, that needs to come off that mount and be refreshed, rejuvenated. And for once I'm going to do what it says in the book. I'm going to do it in the spring. There's a good reason for doing that in the spring. It will be coming into its growth period naturally with the longer days and rise in temperatures. So it will naturally come back into growth. With that growth will come a new set of roots. Depending on how damaged the old ones get, those new roots could be essential. And the reason why that one is not as easy to grow as a lot of other type of dendrobiums, it don't produce many roots. It's a very poor rooter. Yeah, so if you lose a root system on that, you're probably going to lose the plant. They grow very few and very slowly. I suspect in the wild, if it's in a brilliant place, it probably grows quite a few more roots, but certainly not where I'm growing it anyway. What was I going to say? There was something up there. Oh, talking of root growth, I'm going to do an update, possibly tomorrow, on all of the 8 orchids that came in that Schwerter order. That was one of them. Yeah, that was a bit of a gamble. I wasn't sure whether that was going to burst into root growth, but it did. And that's an SLC Seagull's Raindrop crossed with Catlatonia Why Not. That should have some pretty blooms. Well, half of them will be. I don't know about the other half, but yeah, that's putting on a good root system now. Some of which are going to stay aerial. Now, here's a trick. You've got something like this. Not yet. These roots aren't quite long enough, but when they get a little bit longer, they will start becoming a bit more flexible. And at that point, I could put a strap round there and pull them back against the moss. And then if they branch, the branches will dig into the moss and get back to the mount and help support it on the mount. But otherwise, they're just going to stay aerial. But if you try bending them when they're a little bit too short, they may well snap. So you need to get them a little bit longer and make sure they're wet. And then they could be strapped down and possibly even a little bit of moss put over the tips of them, just to encourage them to bury down into the mount. But, and that doesn't always work. Sometimes if you enclose aerial roots, they die. They stop growing. But as those are quite new, those will be okay. So another one of the Schwerter ones that's doing roots as well was the little Sophronitis. So the roots on here, I'm going to have a job to get this close enough, they're all growing. They've all got green tips on them, except these couple of spindly ones out the front here. But they've all got a green tip on them. They're all growing, including the ones heading upwards. Active root growth. Now, I don't know how big that plant's got to get before it decides to bloom. It may bloom on the next new growth, I don't know. Sophronitis do tend to be miniatures, so whether we get some blooms on that or not this season, I don't know. We can hope. So that's another one of the Schwerter ones. That was one that hitched a ride. There were 4 plants that Roger said should be in the box, and 4 plants that hitched a ride from somebody else, which we still don't know who it was. But thanks, 70th birthday present from a stranger via a very strange route. Hitching a ride with a mass order that I didn't even put in, somebody else did it. That's a strange way to get some orchids. Yeah, there's not much else going on out here. We do have some more Cattleya buds pushing out of sheaths, including, for those of you who've been around a while, the red one. The one that's got lots of red in its name, and the name's about 8 foot long. So you red, it's red summit or other, red dragonfly or red butterfly or something or other, but it's a really big long name. Those buds have just pushed out of the sheath, so we should have those again soon. But it's right up the back there against the glass, I can't get at it, so we'll leave that one where it is. Right, and this Nobly still isn't open. Still got huge buds on it, but they haven't opened yet. Stand that back up again. That's a very top-heavy plant. So the pot lives in a big black pot, yeah, and then the black pot lives in a tray, and I can manoeuvre it in such a way that it stands upright now, using the heavy bits. Think how much heavier that's going to be when those blooms open. And it'll be lopsided. I'll just tip the camera, or turn it slightly, just so that you can see I did actually set up the Oh, my battery's going to go in a minute. We better pack it in, haven't we? Somewhere like that. Just so as you can see, the two Miltonias that are in the feeding project are both here. Yeah? So they have got... And what I'll do is every time I water these, I will swap them. Because obviously that one's a bit nearer the glass than this one is. But then this one is probably going to get more light from up here. We shall see. But by just swapping them round, they'll even themselves out. And they're not getting moved enough to make a dramatic change to them. And quite honestly, the light levels there are going to be virtually the same for both plants anyway. So I'm trying to cut down the variables so that they both get the same treatment where possible. So yes, those will be on film again when I water them tomorrow, simply because they will get fed. So I will do that. Will be a separate video for just those two, so that we can document it. But I just wanted to. I won't be filming them every time I water them. Let's not be silly here, especially in the summer months. But I will, the first time I feed them, as the project's only just started, I will actually show that and show the feed level that went into the first one, and then the slightly higher feed level that goes into the second one. I'm not putting a huge amount of feed in immediately. I'm going to stagger it so that the one of them that's going to get the higher level of feed doesn't get it all at once. It builds up gradually, which will go with the day lengths getting longer. Yeah, so we'll build it up gradually until we get to somewhere near nearly twice as much feed for that one, and really see if it does make a difference. Be interesting. Right, that'll do. And if you've got problems with orchids and you solve them, let's have a video. If you're a creator, tell us all about it, what you think went wrong, what you did, and whether it worked or not, how it worked, how well it worked, all that sort of stuff. But share that sort of stuff. Keep it to yourself. It's worth knowing. Now, you may get something that's gone wrong with your orchid and you don't know what's wrong. Well, doing nothing isn't going to help much, is it? So even if you don't know what's wrong, try and go for the most obvious. And the first thing to do is pick that pot up and have a good look at what's in that pot. And if it looks all dark and smells a bit Fausty like a damp cellar, get it out the pot. Most problems are there, yeah? They're in that pot, media going off and all that sort of stuff. And it doesn't necessarily have to be ridiculously old to have gone off. Some media just drops. You can repot 4 orchids at the same time, you know, and a year later one pot is going off and the other 3 are fine. It can vary, you know, and a lot of it depends on how much root growth there is in that pot and how much water it's actually getting, and is it using it. Again, you've got 4 plants all repotted at the same time, all the same size pot, all with the same media. Number 1 pot's full of roots, number 2 pot hasn't got any. Which one's going to stay wet longest? Yeah. Sometimes it's obvious if you say it out loud, but when you just stand there scratching your head looking at it, if you don't change anything, the problem's probably not going to go away. So think of the most obvious, check your pot out first, and then stop and think environment. Where is this plant? How is it living? Is it in hot, dry air and it's a cool grower? Well, there's your answer. Or is it a warm grower and we've been away for a fortnight and turned the heating off before we went? Well, that's probably why your leaves are going a bit yellow then. Plant's dying, it's too cold. Or it's a sudden change to cold from warm. Yeah. When you do changes, do them gradually if you can. But, watering frequency, yeah, watering too often, feeding too high will often cause problems. So start there, exclude that first. Is the media okay? Exclude that, and then have a think about the air, which is temperature, humidity and light. What else is there? No, this huge big long list. You've got, you know, how frequently you water, how high your feed is, what your temperature is, how humid is it, and how much light. Is that a big list? No. It's in there somewhere. Now, don't forget, it could be more than one. It could be too cold and too bright and too wet. 3. But it's in there somewhere, and a lot of the time it'll be in the pot. So, right, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm watering my mounts today. I should be watering all the pots, but I'm going to leave them. There's no sign of any sun. We didn't get any yesterday, and it's cold. I was thinking I was going to put a top on while I was out here, but yeah, it's 18, 19 degrees is actually comfortable if you're busy. I enjoy that temperature if I'm active, but I'm not exactly active, stood here chatting to a flipping camera, so I've chilled down a bit now. I'm a bit chilly because I've done with the top on. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your weekend, what's left of it. Some of you have got a lot more left of it than others, and some of you haven't got any of it left. And for those who haven't got any of it left, you know, you're in a different part of the world, and a lot of what I say about what goes on here might not even be relevant. You have to bear that in mind. Somebody living in tropical countries with all their plants growing out in the garden, hanging off trees and off the fences and stuff like that, how I'm growing here is not that relevant really. They're just two different worlds, aren't they? So right, and I'll see you next time. I've got a few things lined up to film during this coming week. Yeah, so I shouldn't be too short of ideas this time round, but we'll see how we go. And where are we now? As I say, everything in the 8th is not due yet, is it? No, of course not. Yeah, a lot of people do their blooming stuff at the end of the month. That is a far more logical time to do it than when I do it. How it became on the 8th, I don't know. It was probably just the first time I decided to film everything in bloom on this day, and it happened to be the 8th, and it's just, that's what we do now. So, and I don't see any point in changing it, quite honestly. So a lot of people accumulate, so they do everything that has been in bloom at the end of the month. That's not the same as everything in bloom on the last day of the month, is it? There is a difference there. One normally has quite a bit more than the other one, for a start. Anyway, I'll get this before the battery dies on me, and I shall see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. Long chat today, sorry about that.